So Bitcoin on 2 hourly, very small time frame, but we'll start with the small time frame, is basically creating an uptrend, which in my opinion is quite of a bullish thing. However, because we have entered into very temporarily greed, of course we had a pullback. Nonetheless, Bitcoin held this level of support, and at the moment on very small time frame we are trading sideways. So looking at 3 hourly, what we can also well, technically spot is that inverse head and shoulders, right? I'm not going to tell you that all of the patterns are working, but this is something that I have spots, so that obviously is a good thing, which is accompanied by fear, which obviously could spark the question, is the pump brewing at the moment? Well, looking further at 4 hourly, guys, what we can see is potentially a fake out, right? Because if I'm going to click on 12 hourly, we clearly see that Bitcoin held this overall level of a support, and we had this huge deviation towards the downside, right? So what was that? Well, that happened in the past, guys. Many times people that were longing Bitcoin like crazy put their stop losses in here, and of course they had to be liquidated, right? And why do I think that such thing occurred? Well, because right after this huge candle towards the downside, we had a huge candle towards the upside, right? So most likely, guys. Now, looking at the daily time frame, what we see is that, again, on a more zoomed out perspective, is that Bitcoin is basically creating some form of a rising triangle, which in many cases actually is a bullish territory, right? Sorry, bullish pattern. Now, looking at that, guys, it was perfectly going according to the plan, right? So of course market makers had to connect with the news and again shake people out. And why am I not panicking? Well, that's because Bitcoin's price didn't really go below this line, which, coming back to the previous all-time highs, is a strong level of a support, right? So as you guys see, in my eyes at least, this is a bullish thing. All right, so now what we can expect from a little bit of a longer time frame, right? We are of course going to get into liquidity, but looking at 2 daily, guys, we see that these bull flags, right? I didn't really put the poll, but from the purposes of looking at it, if you guys want, you clearly see that this is a bull flag pattern, right? So obviously these are very, very bullish patterns which are coming into fruition quite often. So as you see on 2 daily, Bitcoin potentially is starting to print a bullish pattern, which is a bull flag, again accompanied by fear. Smart traders are purchasing the fear and they are going to sell the greed, just like in here. Now, looking at 3 daily, guys, what we can also see is that Bitcoin is potentially creating something like a cap and handle, as you see in here, right? And then boom, we've got this falling flag, which is a bullish pattern, also with cap and handle, right? So no matter how you cut it and look at it, Bitcoin to me looks bullish. And now something that you guys have seen in a thumbnail. First of all, level 1 Fibonacci extension, we are experiencing a pullback, okay? And now 1.618, which in my opinion could be the peak in this cycle. And guys, I'm not saying that this is financial advice, of course. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but that would be very reasonable. Why? Well, first of all, money to supply. Second, we are nowhere near if it comes to level of the greed that has occurred in here in that previous pump, right? What we saw basically that, coming back from the bottom from these areas, from levels of 73k, is just this little cloud, right? And yes, you might be thinking like how this one indicator can actually tell us the future. Well, of course it's not going to tell us the future, but it's definitely going to help us to determine whether it's a good time to buy or sell, right? So as you can see, guys, the level of greed that Bitcoin created with this recent pump is nothing in comparison to these huge waves in here. So that's something that I believe we should be looking at, right? Now, a little bit of a concerning thing is that stochastic RSI is showing us on a weekly that we could flip bearish for Bitcoin short term, and we could technically retest this level as a support in here, which will be devastating for altcoins. What is the other reason why I think that this can potentially come into fruition? Well, let me actually zoom in a little bit and let me draw Fibonacci extension one more time, but we are going to examine the very previous pump for BTC. So if I'm going to draw it here and put it to the lowest level of the pullback, we see that 1.618, which is exactly here, got sold, right? We got sold at 1.618 zone. So I believe that levels like 1.618 are very, very important, right? Let me delete this Fibonacci extension now, and looking at this current price action, Bitcoin still haven't reached 1.618. What does it mean? Well, it's very likely that it will. Okay, so now let me actually go to the daily time frame, ladies and gents, and let's put global liquidity index and let's see how things are rolling if it comes to that. Okay, so as you see, guys, this last dip for global liquidity index potentially has been formed already and finished, right? I'm not entirely sure if, you know, we are going to see a little bit more pain. Nonetheless, you know, a couple of weeks from now, in my personal opinion, of course, we could see some upside, okay, for Bitcoin, and that potentially could be the top. Okay, of course, I'm not going to tell you that Bitcoin is going to reach 400k. It's definitely very possible. Nonetheless, guys, you know, for people that are waiting, you know, for Bitcoin reaching that high evaluation, well, where were you here? Okay, this is the level where you should be accumulating. Okay, but now, guys, are you late for altcoins? Well, I personally don't think so, because looking at the index, we can clearly see that now it's a Bitcoin season still, okay? And this previous pump brought many retail investors into the market, which basically sold with loss, okay? Because they've been buying the tops, all right? So what can happen in very foreseeable future is that Bitcoin is finally going to reach that evaluation of that 130k, which I have just mentioned about, and then the dominance of Bitcoin is going to drop towards the downside, because yes, guys, we still haven't reached lower levels and proper drop for Bitcoin's dominance like we did in the previous cycles. Okay, so I do hope, guys, that you are not, you know, purchasing Bitcoin unless it's for a very long time. Of course, not financial advice, because I believe that opportunities are there in altcoins. Well, why? We can see that we are experiencing a little bit of an outflows from Bitcoin, and if we are going to look at ETFs, we got some traction going on for Ethereum. So if Ethereum is going to start pumping, well, guess what? Altcoins probably will too. And now, guys, on the top of that, we've got US Treasury that just backed 10 billion of its own debt, which is the largest treasury buyback in history. So guys, money is coming. Looking at money to supply and that thing that I've just shown to you, of course, not the only thing, because we are still waiting for Donald Trump to actually cut interest. Well, sorry, not Donald Trump, but Jerome Powell, or potentially somebody new that's appointed by Donald Trump that's going to cut interest rates, which is going to result in money printing, basically. Now, guys, looking at funding rates, nothing is overheated on 30 daily, which gives me more confidence being bullish. And of course, on the top of that, looking at liquidity levels, if it comes to the daily time frame, we are, let's say, even. Okay, however, 7 daily is showing us that we have more shorts in the market for BTC rather than longs. Okay, and also on the 30 daily, guys, we see how retail traders flipped quickly. We have $15 billion worth of shorts versus 9.5. okay, so that is a huge amount of money, which can also be seen more visually in here. All right, so guys, remember, yellow color, this is where the money is. Okay, so the price of Bitcoin or any other asset will go towards the yellow color sooner or later. Now on a daily, guys, it's very difficult for me to judge whether Bitcoin is going to, you know, pump towards the upside or not, but obviously this is just a short time frame, guys, right? Looking at the weekly perspective, what we can see is that more liquidity is being built up on the top side. Can we see a quick wick towards the downside? Yes, we can. Nonetheless, you see how much money is currently above current Bitcoin's trading price. So guys, to conclude my video, longer term, I believe that Bitcoin is going to see price evaluations of around 130 US dollars, and after that we are going to reevaluate the charts and of course market sentiment. Guys, thank you very much for watching this update. If you want more only charts to look at on this channel, make sure to subscribe, and of course remember that this video or any other video is not financial advice. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, Peace and love, crypto.